Salut, ça va? Santé?
Coucou, bienvenue from France. Welcome back to the show where we talk about life, different perspectives, and un petit peu de français, usually with a glass of wine or a spritz. Thank you guys for coming back to the show. Our topic today is the reality behind living the dream abroad. I thought this was an important topic because there are so many things that people share when they live abroad. And yet there's so many things people hide when they live abroad. And I felt like it was important to kind of share the real perspective because I just don't think it's fair to go on TikTok or Instagram and only see the curated images. I think it's important to share the reality from someone who's living it and doing it. And that's something I wish I would have known before we moved abroad. And so I didn't go in with these like rose colored glasses on, but that I had a full perspective. And this hit me because I wanted to share an interesting story. So I was just back in the United States, as I mentioned, and it was interesting. We have gotten so used to euros as our currency for money. And I didn't realize that my kids moved here when they were 3 and 5, had maybe seen and been exposed to some American money. But we got back to the US and I realized that my son, who's now 9, almost 9 and a half, does not know like a dime from a nickel from a quarter in American dollars. And I was like, this is kind of interesting. Like, should I be upset about this? He could tell me every coin in the euro. And the euro, if for those of you who are aware, it like logically makes sense. Like the 1 cent, 2 cent is like bigger, is smaller than the dollar coin, which is smaller than the $2 coin. So it sort of has this like logical sense to the money value is equal to the size of the coin. That is not the case in American money. And I don't know how I never realized this until my son was like, I laid out a dime, a nickel, and a quarter. And he was like, so the dime is 10 cents for those of you that aren't American, and the nickel is 5 cents, and then the quarter is 25 cents. But the nickel is like 2 times the size of the dime. And then the quarter is bigger than them both, which makes sense because it's 25 cents. But he was like, my son asked me, why is the dime that's 10 cents smaller than the coin that's a nickel that's 5 cents? I was like, I never thought about that. And I didn't really know the answer. So I looked it up for him. I don't think he was that satisfied. It's just little things like that that made me realize when you raise kids abroad, you sort of take for granted that they will become the culture that you or your husband grew up in naturally. And it's not true. They're just not aware of the same things that you were aware of when you were a child growing up in that culture. And there were other things that hit me over the course of my last 3 weeks in the US. Like, he has no idea how American baseball works, like why they're running bases and hitting like this bat. So that was like a foreign concept to him. My daughter went grocery shopping with me. She's now 7. And she was like, what are Pop Tarts? And what are these fruity pebbles people talk about? Like, no idea of, let's just call them trashy American foods. And I was like, is that good or bad? I don't know. I grew up like, I always had Pop Tarts and like toaster strudel, all these American things. But so all these things kind of hit me. And I thought, why don't I actually just talk about, for those of you who are interested in what the reality is of living this dream life abroad? And so let's just say you scroll on TikTok or Instagram, and even what I share, right? It's like, I'm going to show you the Aix-en-Provence market with beautiful fresh fruits and vegetables and incredible flowers. I'm going to show you this beautiful crisp rosé that you have at the bistro, and it is delicious. I'm going to show you the way the cobblestone streets hit the lighting at night and the way it like almost doesn't look real. Like the croissant, the fromage, like all this beautiful things that are really like at our fingertips when you live abroad. And something like we might go to Italy in less than 2 hours, and then I can show you all the beautiful parts of Italy. And I know it looks like a dream, and honestly, so many days it genuinely is. But I think it's important that if you are thinking about moving abroad or you live abroad, and I've now been here over 3 years, I think it's time to tell you and show you the things I don't post and the ones that people don't who do live abroad don't necessarily want to explain because it's hard to explain and it's easier just to leave out the hard parts because the beauty is really so special. But I think every person who smiles and lives abroad and says it's amazing is like sort of quietly carrying something more complicated underneath. And so I'm going to make a few kind of observations today of the reality. And my first one is it's not all sunshine and sprit. It's literally anytime you want to go to see family and you live far away, it's 20 hours of flights, driving, exhaustion, like no international direct flights. You're jet lagged a lot. Like no one talks about the jet lag that you feel. For me, at least, not so much when I go to the US, but we got back and it is at least a week of the kids not sleeping, everybody like up, just like kind of like groggy days. And you just try to keep it all together. You do the best you can. You use melatonin. But like when you're going to the US and you've now traveled like on multiple flights, you've got all these suitcases, you're trying to manage the kids. There are things that go through your head on these days. Like I just had this feeling and I literally because I love journaling, I wrote this would be so much easier if we lived in the US. And then in my head, I was thinking, oh, if I have to haul all this SHIT through one more airport, I might lose it. And then it's like, oh, I know I want to visit more and I know I should, but like, man, this is really freaking hard. And then you kind of like try to get over it and forget about it, but it's real. And like that travel is like, it's no joke. And it's often. It's sometimes like this last year we went 4 times, and this year I think we're going again 4 times, and so that's almost every quarter that you are jet lagged on both ends and trying to kinda do the best you can to manage children through that. And then I think the other thing people underestimate, and I totally underestimated this, is the time zone difference. Like, if you are gonna live somewhere far away, there's at least somewhere between a 6 to 9 to sometimes 10, depending on daylight savings, time difference. And so when you decide you're going to work like abroad, which I was like, oh, this should be fine. I'll take my same clients from California and I will just work on Europe hours. I did not realize that that means your day starts at best at 5 p.m. European time and can go till 2, 3 in the morning if you allow it. And because that's a normal work day for Americans living in California. Yes, it's better for the East Coast and obviously, with Central Time as well. But there's also just like the work thing. But then there's also little moments when, like, mom, if you're listening, like, I want to call you and tell you something during the day. But I realize, like, oh, she's still sleeping. Like, and I get kind of sad and I put my phone back down. And then by the time it's time to like actually call you, the moment has passed and I don't really have that much to share and I'm on to my evening. So the other thing I think to come back to the point of it's not all sunshine and spritzes is the language. When you speak English, like I like to think in English, I come across as like warm, hopefully articulate, maybe sometimes like I like to make funny jokes with my kids. But you can't do that in French unless you are beyond fluent. And so most days, like I am just trying to desperately be understood. I have a much more limited vocabulary. My friendships can't go as deep if they are all in French. And so you kind of forget that like this language stands as an enormous barrier between yourself and who you want to be and the culture that you have chosen to live in. There's also in any culture you move to that's not your own, these norms and rules that you don't even know existed. And you might do something really that you consider normal by American standards, and you watch people so confused by what you thought was a normal situation be like shocked. So I'll give you an example. I used to think it was like pretty normal if I wanted to like go for a run or go to a workout class to put my workout clothes on and then go to the class and then take the class, right? No, that is not culturally normal in France. You wear a normal outfit, like a dress, a skirt, whatever, to the workout class. You bring your workout clothes. You then change there before the class. You then, after the class, change back again into street clothes so that you are never seen walking around in like sweaty workout clothes. At first, I'm like, why is everyone staring at me when I walked into the workout class just ready to go to the class in my workout clothes? And then all these French women were like looking at me, and I realized, oh, they're all changing. Oh my gosh. And now they're changing back. And it was just this like shocking moment of, oh, that's what people do here. It's not normal to just be walking around in your workout clothes to go to a workout class. So it's like things like that you just wouldn't know until you've had this sort of, I would call it like embarrassing, but somewhat just like uncomfortable experience of not knowing that that's what the cultural norm is. And so I just think it's important that like what you see is a curated version and nobody's like talking about these little things that happen that honestly are like just sort of make you feel like, oh, like they shock you for a minute. And then you sort of judge and then you become accepting of it. And then eventually, like for me, I just sort of now know that's the norm and I go with it. So that's one thing. Don't think it's all just sunshine and spritzes. There is a life underneath that that none of us post about. The second thing I wanted to talk about, if you move abroad and you're like, oh my gosh, my life's going to be so different and I am going to be like a different person there and I can have this like whole new kind of like sense of who I am and what I'm going to be and what I'm going to do with my life. That's all really great. But like nobody tells you like you're going to bring everything with you of who you are when you move. Like every problem, every worry, every anxiety, every unresolved thing that you have not dealt with, it comes across the ocean with you. That's just a newsflash. Like, sure, you might change your country code and maybe you change your outfits, maybe you change like some things about you, but like who you are and that emotional baggage that you're carrying is still there, still needs to be dealt with. And it's like you can't become this like fresh start, fresh location, fresh exterior, and have the same interior. It's like you look like you are a different person, but you're carrying everything and you're still yourself on the inside unless you've really dealt with the stuff that you are still carrying and still who you are back in your home country. And so some of the work that I've realized is like, I just got to know myself a lot better when I moved abroad. Like, I found out like why I was so anxious, like what things I carried from childhood that were like sort of beliefs that don't need to be true anymore. And it was through a lot of like work on myself to become a person I wanted to become. And I didn't need to move to France to do that. I could have done this work in the US or in any country I chose. But like, I think it became more apparent to me here that I wanted to grow and evolve as a person and therefore like put that time and energy into who I wanted to be. And that meant like dealing with how I handle anxiety, dealing with how I like perceived myself, dealing with like all my insecurities and learning how I like handle that and how I can like start to learn to listen to myself, start to learn to be the person I want to be. And this is a work in progress. I don't think this ever ends, but I think it's important to realize that like you can't just pick up your life and think you're going to be different and everything's going to be better and easier and suddenly your marriage will be better and your kids are going to be raised perfectly. Like it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. It works in a way of you have to do the work no matter where you live, and when you do that work for yourself, then the change will happen. And that also, I should say, takes a lot of time, but it's honestly like the best work. I love this quote and I shared this like with a friend of mine. It's like the work you do on yourself is the work you're doing for your children too. Like the more you work on yourself, that is the best gift you can give your kids and your husband and your friends and your parents. Like to be authentically who you are and to work on who you want to become, I just think is amazing and exactly what I've been trying to do over the past, I would say, 3 years since living here. You don't have to move abroad to do that, but I just also want your eyes to be open that you have to learn to like be who you are, not be afraid to listen to yourself, and just be comfortable with that. So that's, I would say, observation number 2 of the reality. The third reality is you are never really fully at ease. Like there becomes this sort of, I'm just going to call it disorientation that comes from living abroad where you no longer really fully belong anywhere. Like I don't feel fully American anymore. And I honestly feel like it'd be hard for me to like right away reintegrate into the American culture. But I'm not French. I will never be French. And I'm not trying to be French. But I've made my peace with both of those statements. And it's like the challenge with making peace with that, and maybe I haven't fully made peace, is that you kind of exist in this like permanent in between. Like you're not fully at home when you go to the US. Like I don't feel fully at home there. And I come back here and like I do feel at ease, but it's not like I feel at home. And I think there's an interesting differential between feeling at ease and feeling at home. And I think this has things to do with cultural norms and language, like I mentioned. But there's like layers of belonging, I would say, in a culture that you choose to live in that will never, ever be the same as the country that you're from. And you can feel much more at ease. You can become fluent in the language. You can get to know the boulangerie like person who works there. You can get to know like your everyone you see every day that makes it feel more like home. But I don't think that, at least for me, that there is a way to feel like you are 100% at home in a country that you didn't necessarily, that you weren't necessarily born in. And maybe that just takes time. And I'd love to hear from those of you who've been living abroad like 20, 30 years. Like, does that change? Because I, at 3 years, like, just don't know how I could see that happening. And so I think for me, it's like I'm living in this constant in between that some days can feel really lonely. And that's hard to explain to someone who's never felt it. And I just think it's important that you understand that if you're thinking about living abroad or you're currently, in that state, like what it's like, and to know you sort of just have to become at peace with that and appreciate the good in like both. Okay, the fourth thing I think is important about the reality of living abroad is you worry about your kids in entirely different ways than you did previously. So if you raise kids abroad, you're tempted to only share what you think people want to hear. Like, oh my gosh, yes, of course, my daughter speaks 3 languages now. It's super cool. Oh, you know what? Yeah, my kids are so aware of cultural differences and they have friends from every country and it's super interesting and they ask really curious questions. And honestly, all of this is so incredible and truly amazing and it's all true. And I mean that like so genuinely. I just think what nobody is really like talking about is that my kids, like I told you the story at the beginning, are being raised in a different country where the traditions are different, the celebrations are different, the mentality is different. They go to a French school system that's so rigid in ways that honestly kind of concern me sometimes. Like it's very academic, it's very strict, it's very heavy on conformity, it's much lighter on creativity than I'm used to. There's not this entrepreneurial spirit like they tried to cultivate and I feel like really exists in the culture of California, for example, where we moved from, where innovation, like multidisciplinary ways of thinking were encouraged, like kind of coloring outside the lines was okay. This is like small but big, and it caught me off guard. I did not think that the school systems would be that different in a way that is molding my child in a way that maybe isn't aligned with like how I think I should mold my child from a academic and scholarly perspective. And that's just something super interesting to think about when you think about like the schooling and how that really, I would say, sort of informs who your child becomes and curates that person. So that's one thing. I would say the second thing is like sports. Like my kids think football means soccer. And they've never been to an American football game. I'm yet to take them to them. I would like to. They think March Madness, like this year, we made a big deal out of celebrating March Madness, which, for those of you that aren't American listening, is like a tournament in March in the United States. It's basketball, and all the different like university teams play each other. And, and it's like people bet and it's fun. And there's a million games on at once. And my son was like, "What is this March Madness? Like, are people going crazy? Is that what the madness means? Like, what are these? Like, where is Gonzaga and where are these universities? Like, no idea." And I guess I just took it for granted because I think a lot of American children at 9, 10 years old would have a pretty good sense of like these universities and at March Madness and who plays whom. And, anyways, just an observation that I think is interesting. The other thing that, you know, things that we take very, like, I would say normal, but maybe we don't ask questions is like Thanksgiving, which my kids go to school on Thanksgiving in France. There is no Thanksgiving. Nobody celebrates. I mean, why would they? I try to reenact the holiday here. And honestly, I've done like where I've ordered turkeys and then the turkey's like, you can't just like buy a turkey off the shelf. The turkey's like huge or it's like just not what I expected. And then you try to replicate like making all these like interesting sides and bringing into the kids' school and sharing the traditions. And it brings up like so many more questions than I have answers for. Like, who are the pilgrims and why did they eat turkey? And how come only Americans celebrate this? And honestly, the list goes on. And there was kids when I went to celebrate Thanksgiving and present it to my daughter's class. This was last year, who were all like 5 and 6 years old. They brought up all these questions, and honestly, you guys, as an American, I felt embarrassed. I didn't have the answer to a lot of them, like and I was like, "I should know this, right?" And I just think that's also maybe a shock of our own culture, that things we just take for granted, that we celebrate these American holidays, we actually don't know all of the, like, history and roots and rationale behind them, and I just think it's interesting. It's like I have to hold these answers to my native culture and my kids' native culture that they're slowly growing away from. And I'm the one that is responsible, like my husband and I, for providing these answers because they're not going to get it in France. And so that's a challenge. And that's something interesting, I think, to sit with. And then I think there's other conversations that come up. Like my husband and I are having this conversation like, how important is it that our children go to an American university? Does that matter? Is that something we need to figure out now? Like, how do we navigate that? Like, do they need to go to different types of schools and get certain types of degrees? And how important is that anymore? And so these are like philosophically rich conversations, but also very like raw, real, and difficult information or conversations that I think are just worth sharing with you guys because it's something you don't think about when you just see the like amazing life on Instagram or TikTok. Like these are big questions. So then I think there's like let's call it the fifth reality. It's like, how do you want to show up in your adopted country? So I think that living abroad like quietly asks something about our identity beyond what I just mentioned of like what you're carrying with you when you move abroad. I think it's like, how do you choose to adapt? Like, do you choose to carry and hold on to your American habits because they're yours? And of course, you have every right to them. So if you wanted to wear your workout clothes to the workout class and go through the city all day in them, like that's a choice. If you want to carry like the giant Stanley Awala water bottles that no French person would ever carry here, you can do that. If you want to talk at what I would call full American volume at a quiet French restaurant when every other table is like a soft murmur, you can do that. And maybe you don't care, and that's completely valid. But personally, like I do care. And it's not because I'm trying to pretend I'm French. It's just because I'm trying to adapt, maybe even imperfectly, to just make me not feel like a permanent tourist in my own life. I don't like that feeling. And if I feel like I am choosing to live here and raise my family here, like I have to not just be passing through it and decide to hold on to everything that I thought was okay in the US and not abide by any cultural norms in France. Like that's a personal choice, but I am making one for myself that I want to show up in a country that's letting me live inside of it and be part of that culture in ways that I think are important. And so it's just something I think you have to ask yourself, like, how much do you want to hold on to what maybe isn't as culturally respected or normal in your adopted country? Question worth asking for sure. The last point I'll make, I think there are constant comparisons, and it is so easy to make friends with other expats abroad. And all people want to seem to do is like compare and contrast and they talk about their frustrations and talk about what's good and what's bad about this versus Australia, maybe where they're from, or the UK, or this and that. And sure, we can all do that. We all have home countries that we have come from that are different from our life in France. The things that people complain about here are like, oh my gosh, can you believe how like the bureaucracy and how slow everything is? And did you know I had to go to 8 different stores today to just get the things I needed to make a dinner where I could have gone to one American grocery store and they would have had all of this. And it's like then people just talk about the constant conversations about visas and did they get their paperwork and did you get your titre de séjour? And it's just like the bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy. And it almost makes like, for me, it's like I used to complain about the American DMV. And now I'm like, that's actually a pretty efficient system. And I've complained about it. Don't get me wrong. I don't do it on the podcast because I don't want to bring that negativity into your life, my life. I think it's important to just understand that, like, people are going to complain no matter where you live. I'm sure wherever you are listening from today, somebody is complaining about something. And maybe that's just part of life. I am trying very hard not to get caught in the comparison, complaining situation that's very easy to get caught up in because I think people back home also have a lot to complain about. And I think people didn't ask us to come to an adopted country and then complain about everything with that country and narrate everything that annoys us about how the people choose to live here. And so I think you have a choice when you move abroad. Like you can keep comparing to the place you left, or you could just actually let yourself be and live here and choose not to complain and find the beauty in both and find what's frustrating and understand that that's frustrating no matter where you live and that there will be frustrations and there will be people complaining. And the only thing you have that you can actually own is your mindset and your perspective and how you choose to engage. And so I just think it's important that you guys understand like you will find people that are negative and can complain no matter where they live, no matter what country you live in. And you just have a choice. You have a choice in where you live now. You have a choice in when you move somewhere. You have a choice in an adopted country of how you choose to engage in that. And I think it's a conscious choice that you have to make to not fall into the traps because trust me, it's a lot easier to complain and find all the frustrations. And it's a lot harder to just try to find the good and the beauty and not engage in those negative conversations. So I would say that's just my other perspective. Like, be okay with, I would say, the positivity that you can find if you allow yourself. So, this is my plea, okay? I would say to everyone back home, like, life is real and genuinely so good when you live abroad. And I am so, so grateful for it every day. But I just think it's also hard in ways that don't photograph well, like me being completely mascara stained, exhausted, like greasy hair, like hauling 2 kids' backpacks, an American Girl doll, and about 20 suitcases this past trip. And to also not show you that my son, or be comfortable enough sharing, my son doesn't know the difference between a dime and a nickel and a quarter. And to also share with you guys that, like, the homesickness that comes when you come back to your adopted country, like, just shows up without warning. And suddenly you're back into a language that's not yours. And, like, it comes with sometimes moments of sadness and defeat. And it's hard and it's really hard. And I just think it's important that I hope you guys understand that, like, I want to show you the whole thing. I want to show you this beautiful glass of rosé in Provence. And I would also show you if I'm going to cry in my kitchen. And I want to show you what it's like to have a school drop off in a new country in a language that you're still learning. And I'm also going to show you the beautiful Sunday market and how much I love just feeling like this is a life I got to create and it's beautiful. And it's just this like constant disorientation of the grief of like who you were and how you're evolving and who you want to be. And it's just this one big, beautiful, complicated life. And I just think it's a breathtaking story that I want to be able to capture and share through the podcast that I think you guys were listening to, through my writing. And it's honest, it's real. I'm choosing it even on the hardest days. And my advice would be to you, like, choose what matters to you and don't be afraid to lean into that. And don't be afraid of who you want to become and go for it wholeheartedly. And no matter where you live, like, there is a reality behind everything that people show you and tell you. And just to understand that and appreciate that it's complicated and there are layers in all of us that need to be recognized and seen and be heard and understood. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So I'd love to know what you guys thought. And yeah, don't be afraid to go for your dreams. And it doesn't mean that living abroad is bad. It's, like I shared, amazing and also challenging. So thank you guys for listening. And I will talk to you again soon. A bientôt. Au revoir.